Hello everyone, this is John from Vulgar Kitten Studios and welcome to episode 4 of our Introduction to Web Development and PHP and VC. So what we're going to be doing today is we're actually going to be starting on working with our command line class. As I said previously in the introduction video, this is a very command line driven application. That's how I intended it to be. So we're going to create command line tools to help us out in working with routes and migrations and different sorts of things. So what we need to do is let's go ahead and come into our application and we're going to create a couple of things. Get rid of this. First of all, in our root, so not in our document root, but in the root of our application, I'm going to actually create a new file, and I'm going to call it lace.php. Now, the reason I'm calling it LACE is because the command line name is LACE. It stands for Linear Action Command Execution. So that's just an acronym that I came up with off the fly, on the fly. So that's the reason that it's called that. And now that I've opened up my PHP tags, I actually want to rename this and remove the .php. So the reason that I put the .php on there to begin with and open up the tags is because I actually want to be able to see my syntax highlighting in here. Because the PHP processor really doesn't care whether it has a file extension called PHP or .fuck you or whatever the hell it's called. It doesn't matter. As long as there's PHP tags within that file and it's got valid PHP code, if you call that file with a PHP processor, then the PHP processor is going to process it as PHP. So we don't want to have to call, whenever we're working with this tool, we don't want to have to call php.lace.php every single time. So we're just going to call it as php.lace. And that's the reason that we removed the file extension from it. All right, so now, like I said, that's in the root of our application. And so we need to make sure that our command line environment is actually in the root of our application. So that's my working directory right there, and just pwd just to verify that I am in the sexy directory, which I know that I am, just based off of this yellow string right here. But within here, I'm just going to go ahead and echo hello, like that. And so now I can say PHP lace, and it's going to echo hello. So that is the most rudimentary PHP command line application that you could ever make, ever. But we also have a way to pass in parameters and give options and things to those parameters through argc and argv. So if I just echo argc here, I can do like PHP lace and then say hello, like that. And it's just going to echo out hello. And as a matter of fact, just to show you that we'll just do hello world, like that. Well, I need to make sure that I save that. And so now we actually get the count. And so to actually get the, let's see if we can do this. All right. So we don't want to do that. We actually want to var dump on our argv. So argc is the count of arguments that we pass in, and argv is an array of the actual arguments. So if we do this, then we can actually see that when we var dump, we get the array, and it actually shows us what we have. So this is going to be the data that we're working with to actually specify parameters and things. So now that we have that, what I want to do is I want to use our object-oriented programming methods and our namespaces in order to construct a intuitive command line interface. And so the way that we'll do that is I'm going to create a new folder within app and call this commands. And within commands, I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call it all capital lace.php. And within here, it's going to be namespaced under commands. So what I'm going to do, first of all, is obviously open PHP. And I'll create a class like this and just call it lace. And it doesn't extend anything, but I do want to namespace it under sexy commands. and I do want to use our sexy app just so that I can actually make use of any sort of application specific services that we might actually have in the future. So now that we have that, first of all, I'm going to create a private static commands variable and make that equal to an array. And the reason that I want to do this is because I want to specify whether a command is a valid command or an invalid command. So if it's not actually a lace command, then I want to do something with that information. And if it is a valid command, then I actually want to call that command. And so that's we're going to store all of those within a array. And so the way that we're going to use this is we're going to create another public static function called initialize, just like we did in our app. In our app class, sorry, drew a blank there for a second. And we're going to pass in our argc and argv parameters just like that. And so now that we have that, I mean, first of all, let's just say that they are equal to null so that we can choose to pass them in or not, so they don't actually have to exist. And let's just echo out hi bitch just to verify that this is going to work. And so let's go back into our lace thingy here, and we're going to have to require in our autoloader. So we'll require once on vendor autoload.php, and we'll have to make use of our sexy commands lace class, and then we'll have to call lace initialize and pass in arg, or just choose not to pass them in for right now. So that way we can just make sure that that actually is called. So we'll do that, and it actually echoes out hi bitch, and so that's what we want. But we want to pass in our argc and argv variables here. See that? And it still works. So now we're good to go. And so now we can say that, we can just say basically, if our argc is equal to 1, so if our count is equal to 1, meaning that there is no more than 1, I mean meaning that we haven't actually passed anything in, then we can do something with that information. And we can also say if it's set our argv and the first element of that array, and we'll do something with that information as well. But first and foremost, what we need to do is we need to set our valid commands. And the way that we're going to do that is we're actually going to use a container. So what we're going to do is we're going to be making a lot of use of JSON all throughout this application. But first of all, we're going to use it right now. We're going to create a new folder in the app, and we're going to call this containers. And within containers, we're going to create a new file, and we're going to call this commands.json. And what we want to be able to do is we want to store a list of all of the valid commands within this file. And so I'm going to create a new object here and call it commands, and that is going to be equal to an array. And we'll just give it the first command, which is in this array, called cly, because we're going to create a command that will allow us to create more commands. And so what we want to do with this is we're going to create a new function within our lace class, public static function, and we're going to call it set valid commands. And we don't need any parameters for that. All we need to do is just grab that container. And so what we'll do is we'll say container is equal to the is equal to JSON, JSON decode file get contents, and then the file path, which is app containers commands.json. And so this is actually going to parse it out as JSON, and we can set self commands, our private static commands here, to container commands, and that is the object. So basically what we're doing is we're setting this array to this array here, and so that way we can actually make use of it right here. And so within here, all we have to do is just call that method. We'll say self set valid command, and so that will actually tell us whether or not, or it'll call this first and create that array of valid commands so that we can make use of that information yet again. So let's say that the command that we pass in is not actually a valid command. And so we're going to use the arguments in order to achieve this. What we want to do is we'll say if not in array arg_v, and the first element that we pass in is going to be the command. If that is not within our commands array, then we'll just echo out, you need to enter a valid lace command, and we'll exclaim that fact. And otherwise, we'll actually do other stuff with that. But for now, let's go ahead and see if that works. So, well, let's just echo yay, just to make sure that it works. So let's go back in here and we'll say PHP lace, and we'll call fly. So we see we get yay. What if we misspell this? Then that's going to tell us that we actually need to pass in a valid lace command, and that is exactly the functionality that we want. So now we actually need to start making use of this command. So since it's a valid command, what we can do is we can go ahead and create a new file, and we're just going to call this cli.php, and that's going to be in the commands directory, obviously. We'll need to open up PHP and create that class, call it cli. Doesn't extend anything, it's within the namespace, sexy commands, and we will use the sexy app command, or the sexy app class, just in case we want to make use of anything else within here. And so what we need to do now is actually give it some functions that we can call. And like most commands, you're going to want a help function, just so that you can actually explain what this command does. So we'll just echo out some info about the apply command, just to be able to call this, and this is basically a placeholder. Obviously, we're going to make it a little bit more robust than that. Excuse me. And we'll also do another, well, let's make this public static. And we'll also make a public static function, which I don't think it really needs to be static. The help will be static, but I'm not going to make this function static. And this is going to be a test function. And within here, we're just going to echo, this is a test. All right, so within the else clause of our command, we're going to first of all want to set that command as a class. So we're going to set the command, and that's going to be sexy. And remember, we need to escape the path when we call our namespaces, because that'll cause syntax errors if we don't. So we have to escape all of our backslashes. So we'll say that's sexy commands, and then backslash, and then we'll append on the argv1. So that is the command. So now that we have that, we can say command is now equal to a new command. So we're calling it just like it would be a class. And so then we can basically, let's try calling the help function. So what we'll do is we'll just command help like so. And so now we can say PHP lace clock. And so it actually calls the help command right out the gate. But what we want to do is we do want that to happen. But we also want to pass in parameters on that command as well, so we can tell it what to do. We can extend our commands any way that we want to. And so the way that we'll do that is we'll first of all check our arguments. We'll say argc. If argc is greater than 2, then what we want to do is set an array of methods. So basically the way that I want to be able to do this is say PHP lace cly command 1, command 2, command 3. So that way we can actually chain on multiple commands throughout just by typing 1. We can call multiple commands or multiple parameters, multiple methods, just by calling the command one time. So we're going to store all of the methods within an array. And so we'll just basically start a loop. We'll say for I is equal to, and I is less than the amount of arguments, argc minus 2, then I plus plus. Within here, we can go ahead and start constructing the methods array. So we'll just push to the next element, our argv, whatever the index is, plus 2, because we need to make sure that we have the correct offset. And then we can create an array of parameters. And first of all, we need to check to see, again, this is going to be like lace, and then the cly command, and we're going to make a make method. Now the make method is going to allow us to create, is going to generate a new class within the commands directory, and that class is going to be whatever we name it. And so what we want to do is we want to actually explode this, or we want to use the make function and then pass in the parameter after that, after the colon. So that's how it's going to work. So first of all, we need to check to see if the colon is in there. So we'll say if the strpos, and this is going to check a string to make sure that just a character is there. So if our index contains the colon character, then we can start constructing it. So we'll say our argument is equal to methods I, and then we'll have to explode that. So argument is equal to explode, and use the colon as the delimiter and the argument as the parameter, and the method will be the argument 0, and then we'll want to make sure that we unset that so it doesn't cause any conflicts within the array, and then we'll set the params equal to our argument. Make sure we don't have any syntax errors there, and then we'll check the count of our parameters to make sure that that is greater than 0, and if it is, then we'll check to see if that method exists, and we have to use the command and the method name. So if that method exists, then we'll use the call user func array method to grab the command called with the method and then our array of parameters, like that. And then otherwise, we'll just again say that, or we'll just echo out that isn't a valid place command, like that. And so let's go down 3. And otherwise, if there's no parameters passed in, I believe this is, yep, then we'll just call the method itself. So we'll say command and then call methods, or methods, and then the index just as itself with no parameters. And if there is no method at all passed in, then we're just going to call that command with the help method. And so that way we can just type it in as the name. So we can just say like PHP lace cli, and that will use the help method. So now if we PHP lace cli test, then we'll see that this is a test. But we can also pass in parameters as well by, let's see, we'll go into cli test. And we can pass in parameters, and we'll just say like x. And then we'll just echo x, like that. We can say PHP lace cli test and then hello. And so it echoes out that parameter. And we can do this with as many parameters as we really want to. We can say like x and then y, and we'll just echo out x plus an empty string with a space, and then y, like that, and then we'll just PHP lace cli test hello world, like that, and then we'll see that we actually call both of those parameters. And so that's pretty much how our bootstrap of our command line interface is going to work, just in general. But I mean, we're going to want to do some things to pretty this up a little bit, and I think that this video is probably running a little bit long. So in our next video, what we'll do is we'll just work on the aesthetics of our command line interface tool. All right, so thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.